In the words of the legendary chef and my personal hero, Anthony Bourdain, food is everything we are. It's an extension of a nationalist feeling, ethnic feeling, your personal history, your province, your region, your tribe, your grandma. It's inseparable from those from the get-go. Welcome to Every Dish a Story, a podcast about a place of food in our lives and what it meant to our ancestors. I'm your host, Kat, and I'm going to take you to a new location every 2 weeks to connect to who we are. Cooking shakshuka is like conducting a science experiment. But in this case, you don't have to worry about something going terribly wrong. Welcome to Every Dish a Story, episode 20. I'm your host, Kat, and today we'll be visiting North Africa, Turkey, Israel, and even Palestine. The name of the dish, shakshuka, means all mixed up. And it really is. The dish, which is thought to have originated in Yemen or Tunisia, consists of eggs cooked in a tomato sauce with peppers, sometimes with onions, other herbs and cheese, and usually is served in an iron skillet in which was cooked, along with bread, which is meant to be dipped in the sauce and the soft egg. So it's not hard to see why it's so popular all over the world. You don't need a recipe for this dish because it's so simple, quick, and easy to make. Shakshuka is practically made for improvisation. Some dishes like pizza can be great even at its worst, and shakshuka is no exception to that rule. But there's still a difference between good and great when it comes to food. So let's examine what is a great shakshuka make. The origin of the word shakshuka is debatable, but it most likely comes from the Arabic mixture, and the dish itself probably began that way, a mixture of bits and pieces cooked in a pan or in tagine with eggs. Like many dishes with crucible origins, minestrone, gazpacho, and hundreds of others, shakshuka these days has been tamed to the point where it's usually made with a specific set of ingredients. Onions and tomatoes are self-evident, as are peppers, but the types of peppers and their ratios to the other ingredients can be debated. The shakshuka from Yotam Ottolenghi's book Abundance uses a ton of peppers cut into large strips. The finished dish almost resembles an Italian peperonata, with its inherent sweetness. Michael Solomonov's version from his book Zahav uses half as many bell peppers. The version by David Lebowitz, which he says was inspired by the recipes of Ottolenghi and Sami Tamimi, uses a different approach. No bell peppers at all, just hot chilies to season the tomatoes. And speaking of tomatoes, which ones to use, fresh or canned? Well, you see, whole peeled tomatoes are usually better suited for sauces than diced fresh tomatoes. Diced tomatoes contain extra calcium chloride, which helps them retain their diced shape even after extended cooking. Whole peeled tomatoes, on the other hand, break down more naturally. Another plus is that whole peeled tomatoes allow you to adjust the texture to suit your needs. For making shakshuka, this means either squeezing the tomatoes through your fingers into the bowl to get even or uneven chunks, or separating them with a spoon already in the pan after adding. Spices for shakshuka can also vary, but most recipes start with paprika and cumin, and then you can add coriander, turmeric, or even saffron. So at this point, any number of additional ingredients can be added if desired. Sliced olives are great, try using black ones actually, as well as some crumbled feta cheese folded neatly into the sauce. If you manage to get sucuk, which is a Turkish seasoned beef sausage, which is like chorizo, has many regional varieties, it is very good to dice, fry, and add to the sauce along with the fat. But even diced pepperoni would be good here. Artichoke hearts are a classic Tunisian addition. It's good to add a handful of greens such as kale or even cabbage, and if you want to make the dish even heartier, you can add large fat cooked beans like fava and diced potatoes. Remember, shakshuka literally means mixture. This dish encourages ingenuity and kitchen savvy. If you can put it in an omelette, you can put it in a shakshuka. And there you have it, a wonderful sauce that you can make ahead of time or even freeze for later. You only need a few eggs to turn this sauce into a dish. This gives you a few more options to make. Turkish menemen, a close relative of shakshuka, is usually made with eggs beaten into the sauce. There are variations of shakshuka that also use this technique, but at least these days, leaving the eggs whole so you can stir in the yolks seems to be the norm, and it's actually my favorite. Make a few shallow indentations in the sauce with a spoon or a spatula and then break the eggs into them. Use a spoon to pour a little bit of sauce over the whites of the eggs so that they set a little faster than the yolks. Cover the pan and steam until the whites have set and the yolks are golden and soft and runny. Some shakshukas are cooked under the broiler or in the oven. These shakshukas do come out with a different texture, and if you can adjust the broiler properly, you'll be able to get some crispy bits around the edges of the pan. But the risk of overcooking the yolks is high, and the potential benefits aren't enough to use the oven instead of a simply lid and stove method. But whether you roast, bake, or bring it to perfection on the stovetop, it's all up to you. There's one thing that is not negotiable though. Shakshuka should be served with bread to soak up all the flavorful sauce and the egg yolk. Fresh, crusty loaf is traditional, but no one will blink an eye if you prefer a pita, ciabatta, French baguette, or even tortillas. The great thing about shakshuka is that it's made entirely from very basic ingredients, with the exception of the fresh peppers, which means you'll always be half an hour away from a fantastic meal. Now let's talk about history. Shakshuka in Israel. According to some culinary historians, shakshuka originated in Yemen. Others claim that it came from the Ottoman Empire. What is known for sure is that the dish came to Israel from the cultures of Northeast Africa, more specifically from the Libyan-Tunisian region. When immigration to Israel from North Africa was at its height, immigrants were struggling financially, and this hearty and affordable dish containing eggs, vegetables, and bread became a family favorite. In addition to being very affordable, shakshuka is also very easy to prepare and requires only one pan, making it even more popular for picnics or light dinners. These days, almost any dish in which eggs are cooked in a sauce is called shakshuka in Israel. And that's how variations such as green shakshuka with spinach, chard, and cream have become popular. If you think about it, Mexican huevos rancheros made with fried eggs served on tortilla with tomato, spicy sauce, beans, rice, and guacamole is very similar to shakshuka. The Italian ovo ambriatorio consists of the same ingredients and is also a great vegetarian breakfast. In Spain, you can try pisto manchego, which is made with an egg sunny side up, placed on an eggplant and tomato stew, sometimes with chorizo, which is pretty similar to some of the variations you can find in Israel. Shakshuka can be seen in many different shapes and forms all over the country, served with bread, in pita bread, inside a whole loaf, on hummus, on pizza, and the list goes on and on. Although the origin of shakshuka remains somewhat controversial, it is believed to have originated in North Africa. The homeland of the dish is believed to be Tunisia. It also has connections in many places in the Middle East, such as Libya, Egypt, Morocco, Turkey, etc. And shakshuka, as a dish of poached eggs and tomato sauce, means mixture. And as the name implies, it is a simple dish that anyone can make at home. Cooking it exceptionally well, however, is another matter entirely. This is where Pino Capso, aka Dr. Shakshuka, comes to the rescue. I was fortunate to actually have visited Dr. Shakshuka's restaurant in Jaffa, and yes, his shakshuka is truly magnificent. But I was more struck by the story of Capso himself, and I want to share it with you. Gabzo is a famous chef known for his North African style of home cooking. His restaurant in Jaffa, which of course is called Dr. Shakshuka, serves such dishes as couscous, mafroum, lamb or chicken shawarma, and the signature dish for which Capso earned his nickname. His trademark is the personal pan in which he serves each shakshuka. It's my invention, he boasts. His establishment has been feeding Israelis and tourists for decades. Capso's parents immigrated to Israel from Libya in the 1950s. His father opened a restaurant called Tripoli in Jaffa, named after the Libyan capital where he lived and which was also the center of Jewish life in the country. Gabzo, who was born in Jaffa as Yosef Binyamin Gabzo, began working at his father's restaurant at the age of 12. In 1991, after his father died, Gabzo became the owner of the restaurant and renamed it Dr. Shakshuka. The restaurant, located next to the Jaffa Clock Tower and the flea market, grew and grew. I never thought that I would have such a big restaurant, he says. I have a courtyard in the center, and gradually I took over all the seats around it. It's like a piazza. The story of how and where Gabzo perfected his shakshuka is well known in Israeli folklore. In addition to the restaurant, my family had a money exchange business in which I also worked, he said. Every time I made a deal, I would come home to my parents' house, and my father would cook me shakshuka in a pan. That's where my dream of making people shakshuka in a personal pan came from. It was the 1980s, and it was illegal to exchange money in Israel. People were fined, but no one was sentenced to prison. Then they caught me, and I got 15 months in jail. It was the precedent. While in prison, Gabzo began cooking food for other prisoners and guards. The prison supplied him with the basic ingredients, eggs and tomatoes, and his daughter brought him filfil chuma, a hot sauce from Libyan Jewish cuisine. The recipe, which he perfected on a portable burner in prison, earned him the nickname Dr. Shakshuka, which was coined by one of the prisoners. For anyone from Tripoli, filfil chuma, which means peppery garlic, is like the air they breathe. Gabzo always carries a jar in his pocket. I take filfil chuma with me and add it to everything, he says. When making shakshuka outside of prison, however, he prefers to use fresh peppers and garlic. At Dr. Shakshuka restaurant, you can order shakshuka hot or mild, a traditional version with merguez or vegetarian. Gabzo uses only merguez from Tripoli, not the Moroccan or Algerian version of the sausage, because it contains anise seeds and lots of garlic. First, he roasts strips of green peppers, adds the garlic and then the merguez. After 2 or 3 minutes, he puts in the tomatoes and doesn't stir, just adds a little salt. If someone walks by and accidentally touches my pan, even lightly, I don't continue the process, he says. Sometimes friends want to piss me off and touch the pan handle. If they do, I yell at them and don't make the shakshuka anymore. If no one gets in the way, he waits another 2 or 3 minutes and then stirs. Then he adds sweet paprika for quote-unquote flavor as well as color. People eat with their eyes, you see, he says. Then he adds crushed shata peppers, stirs, waits a few minutes, and then introduces the eggs. After about a minute, he stirs the eggs, mixing only the whites with the rest of the dish, leaving the yolks intact. Timing is very important, he explains. But the most important thing is the chef's hand. No one makes shakshuka the way I do, not even my chefs. I teach them, they use the same ingredients, but it doesn't turn out the same. I have no problem telling everyone my recipe or even showing them on TV how to make it. But to me, making shakshuka is art, and I know of no one who makes it the way I do. I always say that if someone makes my shakshuka 30% right, they've made it. Gabzo obviously is very proud of his shakshuka, and even prouder since 2013, when he was one of the 2 winners of London's Royal Chef, an Israeli reality show in which respected chefs from around the world came to judge Israeli chefs from various home restaurants. French chef Albert Roux was the head judge, and the 2 winning dishes were added to the menu of Roux's esteemed restaurant Gavroche, the first restaurant in the UK to be awarded 3 Michelin stars. Guess which dish was deemed appropriate for the British royal family? Gabzo knows that shakshuka is served everywhere in Israel, but he sticks to his own. I haven't tried it in other places, he says. I guess someone can make good shakshuka differently, but I don't really believe in that. When I make shakshuka, I get so excited. I immerse myself in it, and I don't think about anything else. Why would I want to try someone else's shakshuka? Well, he's not wrong, you know. Although Gabzo is confident that his shakshuka is the best, he still encourages people to cook it at home, as he does for his 5 children and 12 grandchildren. At home, I have to know that I always have all the ingredients I need for shakshuka, he says. If I run out of anything, I can't sleep. Shakshuka is a very economical meal for a family. The ingredients are cheap and it tastes better than a filet steak. In July 2017, Gabzo opened his long-awaited restaurant on Rothschild Boulevard in downtown Tel Aviv. This is not his first venture outside of Jaffa, though. In the late 90s, he opened a branch of Dr. Shakshuka on the then fashionable Shinkin Street in Tel Aviv, but the venture proved short-lived. This time, he's confident that he will succeed in the big city. Bino is self-service and offers mostly pita-style dishes such as shawarma, falafel. There's also a special version of falafel with added cauliflower, Jerusalem mixed grill, merguez, and entrecote slices. Of course, shakshuka is also on the menu, either in a pita or in Gabzo's signature pan. Now, I want to talk about Palestine a little bit. And of course, the topic of the Palestinian-Israeli conflict is a very complex and nuanced one. And as it turns out, the food and its heritage are also a part of it all. My only intention is to merely examine different aspects of history without judgment. So, shakshuka in Palestine. Palestinian restaurant owners abroad say that it is their duty to showcase the rich culture of their people through maps, posters, photographs, and handmade crafts adorning the interiors of their establishments. It is a voluntary process of raising awareness in the face of the Israeli attempts to fake history by partially appropriating Palestinian cuisine. Fierce culture wars often erupt when Palestinian food is mislabeled as Israeli. Palestinian culture and life revolve around food in all aspects, whether it's an ordinary day or a special occasion. Food and national identity are tied together. Palestinian food lovers know where to find their favorite Palestinian dishes. Cafe Maramia being an Arabic word for sage, is one of the few places where you can get a taste of Palestine in the UK. It serves authentic dishes such as musahan, makluba, mansaf, hummus, falafel, shakshuka, and kunafa dessert. Cooking styles vary by region, and each type and ingredient used tends to depend on the climate and location in historic Palestine. Dining at restaurants like Shakshuka in central London makes people feel like home, especially when they see posters of Palestinian struggle icons such as 16-year-old Ahed Tamimi and Yasser Arafat, as well as Muslim and Christian holy sites and traditional homemade crafts and embroidery. Shakshuka is also the name of the Palestinian dish, consisting of poached eggs in a sauce of spiced tomatoes, green peppers, and chopped onions. These restaurants serve as a hub for Palestinian communities through which people tell their stories, preserve their history, and bring people closer to their homeland by listening to Palestinian music and even learning Arabic in a Palestinian dialect. Although the recipes differ, one thing is clear: you can't call hummus, falafel, or shakshuka Israeli dishes, even if the world's best celebrity chefs try to convince you that they are Israeli. Israel was founded in 1948. A large part of Israeli society consists of Arab Jews who migrated after the formation of the fledgling state of Israel 74 years ago. They brought with them Arab authentic foods. The heated debate is about how can you call these dishes Israeli? Even calling them Middle Eastern or Levantine dishes will calm the debate a little bit. Palestinians often refer to attempts to appropriate their culture and cuisine as an Israeli counterfeiting strategy, aimed at robbing them of their identity by stealing their cuisine, as if the occupation of their land were not enough. They say that inviting celebrity chefs to prepare dishes and branding them as Israeli will not convince the world that falafel is Israel's national snack. Palestinians take pride in their food, and it triggers them when they see counters of falafel in markets in Europe and the United States, branding it as an Israeli national dish. Planting olive groves, citrus orchards, and figs are a part of Palestinian culture because olives and pickles are a must on Palestinian table. For Palestinians and other Levantine countries of Jordan, Syria, and Lebanon, there's no better taste than breakfast with za'atar, dried thyme dipped in olive oil, with a cup of tea with fresh mint or dried sage. If people want a heavier meal, they can have poultry, hummus, and falafel. It is certainly true that food is memory and culture, but claiming ownership of certain dishes that are not part of your cuisine does not give anyone the right to call them your national dish. Cultural appropriation is a denial of the existence and heritage of the owners of the land, the Palestinians, of whom there are millions in the occupied Palestinian territories, in refugee camps in some Arab countries, or in the diaspora around the world. Now, as I said before, this is just merely an examination of different opinions, different sides of the story. As cliche as it sounds, there's at least 3 sides of every story, so please don't get offended. I just want to acknowledge that there are different opinions and they have a right to exist. And this is what my podcast is all about. Okay, now let's lighten up a little bit and talk about Turkish menemen, the cousin or distant relative of shakshuka. Menemen is a traditional and widespread Turkish dish, which is often made with eggs, peppers, and tomatoes, with the addition of various spices. However, like any traditional dish, it comes in many shapes and forms. In addition to these common ingredients, a recipe for menemen with onions is common in some places. The debate over whether or not onions are an integral part of the menemen recipe has gone so far that journalist and food critic Vedat Milor conducted a poll on his Twitter account. There was a lot of interest in the question, and more than 430,000 people took part in the poll. The result was inconclusive, with 51% answering for onions and 49% answering against. I personally love onions, so I'm on the pro-onion side. In addition to onions, there are other ingredients found in some versions and parts of Turkey. It's not uncommon to find sucuk, which is a spiced beef sausage, pastrama, which is beef jerky, and even ground lamb. In some variations, cheese is added for a richer and creamier flavor. Menemen is very similar to shakshuka, which is a staple of Arab and Middle Eastern cuisine. Because the same ingredients are used, some consider them identical dishes. However, there are some differences as well. Unlike shakshuka, where eggs are cooked poached, in the traditional recipe for menemen, the eggs are beaten into the vegetables. In addition, shakshuka has a stronger flavor because it uses more intense spices such as cumin and sweet and smoked paprika. And as I said before, similar dishes exist in other countries of the world as well. Italy's ovo miratorio, or literally translated as eggs in purgatory, by the way. In Spain, it's pisto manchego, and of course the Mexican huevos rancheros. And according to some, all of these dishes actually originated in menemen. They say because the dish itself is named after a region in Turkey, it seems logical to them that its origin should be sought there. The dish is named after the western town of Menemen, the agricultural center of Turkey, located near Izmir on the Aegean coast. In the early 20th century, the cuisine of the area was shaped by both Greek farmers, who lived there before the establishment of the Turkish Republic in 1923, and the Turks, who then returned from the Greek island of Crete with recipes that use oregano, basil, rosemary, and thyme. These herbs were boiled and eaten separately with olive oil, and eggs were broken on top. This new vegetarian dish with tomatoes and eggs eventually became known as menemen and quickly spread throughout Turkey. And it's on this lighter note that I would like to wrap up our little journey into the world of shakshuka. And I invite you to check out 4 recipes for different versions of shakshuka that I prepared for you. There's a classic one, there's a Greek style one, there's the Turkish menemen, and my favorite Moroccan with berbere spice. And the recipe for the spice mix is also on YouTube. So check out the links in the description of this video. Thank you so much for listening. Please continue to eat well, train hard, love cats, and please recycle your garbage when you can. And of course, wherever you are in the world today, I hope that you are safe and that you're healthy. Bye-bye for now, and I'll be back on July 7th with a new journey.